Welcome home. In this podcast, we venture into what it means to be a leader in this new world. Human, flawed but working on things, and forever changed by using our intuition to guide us. I'm Adelina East, founder of Transformational Healing and mentor to those running soul-based businesses. Join me to receive transformational healing, tips to dive more deeply into your unique spiritual gifts, and to hear great conversations with other entrepreneurs in spirit. Let's get started. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Cosmic Leadership Podcast. I'm your host, Adelina East. Before we get into today's amazing interview with Anthony Perrotta, I just wanted to remind you of the giveaway that we are doing. The giveaway is for a free session with me. This can be a session of any type that you like: EMDR, transformational healing, past life regression with Akashic Records reading. All you need to do to enter the giveaway is to head over to Apple Podcasts, subscribe to the podcast, and write us a review. It's a quick 2-second thing. This is an amazing birthday gift to me in honor of my 45 years on this earth. Thank you so much in advance for entering to win. And we will announce the winner on next week's podcast, which will be up on Tuesday, July 9th. So if you want to enter to win a free session with me, head on over to Apple Podcasts, subscribe, write us a review. I appreciate you so much. Stay tuned. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Cosmic Leadership. I'm your host, Adelina East. I am an EMDR therapist, and I have the privilege of working with people overcoming trauma every day. I use this podcast as a means to offer you no-cost healing. Every few weeks, I'll do a transformational healing episode, a solo episode that focuses on a certain theme, just so that you can receive some no-cost healing at home. I also interview people that are inspiring to me, who I also feel are doing incredible things in the world that I find to be healing. And this always ranges from things like astrology, fashion, other therapists, other doctors, those kinds of things. Anything woo-woo, I will always love. And so I really am grateful to all of you, even though this podcast is such a mishmash of different things. I so appreciate that we are still on the Good Pods Top 50. And that is because of you. That is because you listen in every week. And I'm so, so grateful. If you would be so kind as to share this podcast with a friend this week, I would really appreciate it. This week is special. I know I say that every week, but this week is special. So I had an astrologer in my life for many years who I really loved and respected. We never had him on the podcast. It was not that kind of a thing. He was also a numerologist, and I felt like everything that he told me was so spot on all the time. And then sadly, a couple of years ago, I realized that he had become a cult leader. And I just, having been raised in what I would consider a cult, having been kind of enticed by another cult as an adult, which I did not subscribe to the cult side, I just can't get behind that. I can't get behind that. And so because I am a soul business owner, I really wanted to work with someone who was used to working with businesses and understood the timing of certain things. Like when you put out a new course, is it a good time to do so? Is it not such an auspicious time? And help me with some business things. And so I just happened to be chatting with one of my clients who I love, that I see every week. And she told me that she'd gotten a business reading, a career reading from this particular person. And I was so excited. I really felt very attached to him almost immediately. And so I asked for his information. I started researching him. He's a big deal. He's a really big deal. And I was able to get an appointment with him not that far in the future. I think I only had to wait a couple of months. His name is Anthony Perrotta, and he is going to be our guest today. Anthony Perrotta is a Providence-based astrologer, stylist, designer, and author of the AstroStyle book, which comes out very soon. He has been an astrologer for more than 16 years, teaching, consulting, and conducting personal chart readings for clients all over the world. His background is in fashion and interior design. He's been featured in Well and Good, Homes and Gardens, Witchology Magazine, and Bustle. So today you will hear me and Anthony talk about the following things. First, we just talk about astrology and how significant it's been in both of our lives. He tells us his story of how he found astrology and why it became important to him. He goes through a little bit of my chart and shares some things that coincide with his chart. We are actually extremely compatible people. I really enjoy talking to him. Uh, we also talk about his upcoming book, which I feel is such a creative idea. So, in this book, he gives you tips based on your astrology for your personal style. It's not something I have ever spent time thinking about, I have to be honest. When I was working for the UN in various countries all over the world, I had no interest in my style. It was more like getting to a country that made clothes that would be really sturdy and then buying a bunch of them. Like it just, I had no time to think about style for many years. But since I've moved out here to the desert and I have my house now, I do think about style. I've had to buy stuff. I've never had to decorate anything before. Um, all of my apartments and places previous to this were quite temporary. I think this may be one of the first times that I've actually hung things on the walls. And so I've had to pick things. I've had to think about style. I've had to think about how I want to feel when I walk into my house, which is such a privilege. I cannot even tell you. After years and years of vagabonding, it feels so good to have a solid home base. So then that got me kind of thinking about clothes and how little energy I've ever put into clothes, but it's actually kind of fun. And I think now that I feel more calm and settled, I can think about those things. So if fashion is meaningless to you, you have my apologies in advance. I understand. I lived probably 44 years of my life that way. But even if fashion is meaningless to you, this is such an interesting conversation because Anthony is so original. He just comes up with the most original ideas. So I encourage you to listen in. It's really a lot of fun. He goes through my chart and gives me some style tips. We talk about the hilarity of the fact that I've worn really bad shoes for pretty much my whole life. I like them. They're comfortable. That's all that counts. And he shares a lot of tips based on astrology in general, like what happens if your Chiron is here? What happens if your sun is here? So tune in. It's a really great conversation. Okay. So can we start with you telling us a little bit more about how you got into astrology? Like what was the kicker for you to start looking at it?
So it's funny. I would like to think that I had this really dramatic relationship or beginning with astrology, but it really wasn't that way. Um, but sometimes the most magical things can be mundane, right?
Yeah.
So I'm a Pisces sun, and I didn't always resonate with all of the things that pop astrology and the magazines were saying about it. And I'm an ever curious person, right? I'm someone who pauses a show to go down a rabbit hole in Wikipedia to learn more about whatever the thing is.
Yeah.
And so that kind of happened. I felt like for me, if I didn't fully resonate with this thing, is it me or is there more to this? And so it sparked this desire to learn. So clearly there's more to it.
Hmm.
And about 16 years ago is when I started going down that rabbit hole and I became really obsessed and really interested. And I think the thing that enticed me most, or still does entice me most about astrology and this modality, is that I will never know everything about it. It's so expansive and
Yeah.
I'm always learning something new and it inspires me. And I love the endlessness of it.
Yeah. I think that's incredible too. And I love that it's one of those things that's true whether you believe in it or not. So before
Mhm,
I was into astrology, I just lived my life. And
mhm.
once I became interested in astrology, I started looking back like, oh, this is when I met like my husband and I are no longer married because I'm queer, but this is when I met my husband. I can completely see how that happened.
Mhm.
Astrologically, I can see that that was the moment, that was divine timing. It was meant to be at that moment. So it's one of those things that's true whether you believe in quotes or not, you know?
Well, I always say astrology happens with and through us,
Yes.
right? And at times because of us, right? It's the energy that's there. I'm
Right.
very free will based. And yes, there are things that are divine timing. And yes, astrology happens to us anyway.
Mm-hmm.
But then that's where the intentionality of the modality can come in, right? It's
Right.
like, oh, okay, I know I'm having this very specific transit, then fantastic. I should use it. Or
Yeah.
maybe on the inverse, not.
Not. Yeah, exactly. And that is also the cool part of it. Like I could, if when I met my husband, I could have said, oh, I'm not ready. I'm just
Mhm.
genuinely not ready. I'm going to walk away from this because we do have free will. But if I wanted the opportunity, there it was.
Mhm.
Yeah,
It's the most beautiful thing.
it is the most beautiful thing. So you offer incredible services. Not only do you do birth chart readings, but you do business
Mhm.
readings.
Yes.
That was so helpful for me. Anthony and I went through like what my new business is going through. It's actually not a new business. It's a 6-year-old business, but I had to re-register here in New Mexico once I moved here.
Mm.
And so many of those opportunities that we talked about have really been so real. Can you talk to us a little bit more about that? About how business
So
astrology works?
first, I have to tell you, when I read charts and I ever make any sort of predictions or talk about energy, I'm still fascinated to this day when people tell me I'm right. Right. 16 years
Yeah.
later, I'm still like, wow, really? So it makes me very excited to hear that. It's really interesting. So I think that talking about like the magic and the mundane, when we utilize a chart to look at a business, it gives us an additional layer, right? So I have a very business mind in general, but when you add in astrology, it allows you to kind of take a step back and be more, as we were talking about. So if the transits or the planets or astrology impacts us personally, why wouldn't it impact entities,
Right.
right? And so when we look at a business chart, it's important to not just look at the rising of the business or the midheaven of the business, right? It's important to look at the chart holistically, almost as if it is a person,
Mhm.
because there are people behind it,
Right.
right? Making it work essentially. And in this case, it's you. One of the things I like about doing this with small businesses in particular is because how close we are
Yeah.
to our businesses and our brands and our experiences. So what I'll tend to do is I'll take a look at the business chart,
Yeah.
right? Which is what we did. We looked at your transits, we looked at the planets, we talked about things that your business might be going through. But then we'll also look at your natal chart and how do those two things interact and how are your personal transits kind of wrapped up in the business's transits.
Mhm.
A few things I've noticed is people tend to incorporate or separate their identity from their business through their personal eighth house transits in some
Okay.
capacity, typically.
Wait, for those who
Um,
don't know, what is an eighth house transit?
okay, so, oh, this is good. Here I am just expecting everyone to know all the things. This is when a planet goes through a segment of your chart called the eighth house. So your chart is segmented into 12 different pieces of a pie, if you will.
Right.
The eighth house rules many things, can be the magical, the mystical, power struggles, intimacy, death, sex, regeneration. But another thing that it actually rules is divorces, separation, shared resources, shared assets, and coming together, kind of your
Mhm.
financial entanglements with other people. So the reason why I notice this a lot in eighth house transits is because you are divorcing your identity, right, from the
Right.
business in some way by
Yeah.
allowing it to be its own entity, but you also share resources
Right.
with that business. It tends to pay you, you put money back into it, but
Mhm.
even energetic resources, time is a resource, emotional resources. So you end up being in relation to your business just as you are with your chart.
Right.
So one of the things I noticed is that oftentimes when people are experiencing really almost any planetary transit through their eighth house and they're looking to go off on their own, start their business, have an LLC or be a sole proprietor, whatever it is,
Mhm.
happens during those transits, kind of as that separation. The other thing I notice is that there's usually a relationship with the business's big three. So that would be your sun, moon, rising.
Okay.
with your own big three in some capacity. So my personal business's chart is a Cancer rising. I'm a Cancer rising. It has so many planets in Aquarius. That's my eighth house in my natal chart.
Mm-hmm.
So it was just kind of interesting how it even happened in my own chart. It was serendipitous, actually. I
Yeah.
didn't like intentionally pick the time, date, whatever. I was like, oh, register, which is funny because I'm an astrologer. You think I
Right.
would? I was like, no, register the business. Make it happen. That's one of the things I noticed. The other thing I noticed is that typically we get caught up in somehow a nodal story with our
Mm-hmm.
business in some way. So, for those that don't know, the nodes in astrology sort of represent our direction. Maybe I'm going to put bunny ears around this, our karma,
Right.
our past experiences. It's sort of like what we're coming from, where we're going, what we're learning, and maybe very loosely, again, bunny ears, purpose.
Yes.
Right. I try to be very like flexible with
Yes.
interpretation.
Yes.
But the nodes to me are so important in a chart because they talk about kind of trends or experiences that we go through in our life. And similarly, in our business, we'll go through similar trends and experiences. So when we look at a business chart or a natal chart, it kind of tells us the trajectory or like what it's here to embody, what you're here to embody.
Mm-hmm.
And thinking about your, even I think your business's nodal story is caught up in your natal chart personally, as I go to reference quickly.
Yeah. Thank you. I don't remember what
You're
my
welcome.
business nodes were. I know
So
my
your business,
my North node is in Virgo. It was supposed to be
yes.
working on an organization and those kinds of things.
Mhm.
And my South node is in Pisces, which makes complete
Yes.
sense.
So your business's nodes are in Aries and Libra, the new chart from 2024, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why this nodal story is important because it highlights your 10th house of career and your fourth house of home and family, your roots, your foundations, and then kind of what you're going to be known for in this life or in this world. Similarly, there was a lot happening in Pisces at the time
Yeah.
that you incorporated this time around or changed, for New Mexico. That's your South node. So it is caught up in your nodal story, right? This business is allowing you to leverage experiences you've had in the past, right?
Yeah.
And use that sort of as the laying the groundwork for where it's going, where you're going. And yes, you did have eighth house transits when you did this business.
And what does that mean? Eighth house transits.
So, meaning like you had Mercury and the sun going through your eighth house
Okay.
at the time when you incorporated. So, you did that separation of identity. There's the sun in the eighth, right?
Okay.
You chose to say, okay, I am not this business, but we are connected.
Right.
Similarly, with Mercury going through your eighth house, you also had, it's interesting because Mercury is about communication, contracts, and commitments, sort of. So obviously, you signed that contract to separate your identities.
Yeah. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Very interesting. What does it mean to have Aries in the North Node?
So a North Node in Aries sort of is walking away from being overly compromising.
Yeah.
It's walking away from feeling like it needs others to motivate it.
Okay.
And it's moving into the direction of entrepreneurship, leadership, going after our passions, forging our own direction, doing something new, exciting, innovative, and enticing, and not feeling trapped by other people's narratives, thoughts, or ideas in the process of making that happen. So, for your business in particular, with its South Node, where it's coming from in Libra, a gift it has is collaboration. Well, you have a podcast, right? Yeah. So you can build that dialogue and collaborate with other people. But the direction it's heading is a little bit more singular. So, like, how does Adelina show up in this business? What's the feeling? What's the kind of innovation that you're bringing to it? But also, it needs to have a very strong point of view, a really strong sense of identity, right?
Yes, never a
And
problem
you
for me.
yourself, and you yourself really need to show up as that face, as that energy, as that quote brand.
Yes.
So people become really acquainted with you in particular and your kind of personal background and how that's led to where you are today.
That is so true. And this is the thing. I know you say you don't do predictions and all of that stuff, but in some ways, when we talk about things like this, it is like a prediction because you're saying if you show up for your brand, if you show your point of view, this is your north node of that business. This is where you're supposed to be heading. This is what the business was created for. I think we all choose our businesses to grow and to change and to move in the direction we are supposed to. And this move from New York and then LA for a couple of years, and then New Mexico has been so eye-opening in the sense that I am here to show up. I will always have an incredibly strong point of view because I was just born that way. And I will constantly be sharing it. And I will be stepping away from just doing what's best for others, which is how I lived a whole lot of my life. And so this is the beauty of having a business reading with you because you can really tap into all of those things. And I love the intersection of my own chart with my business chart. I think it's things that people might not know unless they really dig in. And who has time to learn like years and years and years of astrology? You know, it's just so much easier to go to Anthony and say, okay, please tell me.
How can you help? It's funny because your business is also a Cancer rising, just like you. So one of the things that I think is great about that is that means how the business wants to show up is also how you want to show up. So it feels very natural to connect with it. Like I said, my business is also a Cancer rising. I am also a Cancer rising. So I feel very similar to you in that way where, you know, yes, I have an LLC, but it is me, right? Like I'm the only person a part of that incorporation.
Yes, me too.
Right. So of course I'm going to show up in that way. This is why I like doing small businesses more than corporate, you know, readings or anything like that. And I like that you talked about the North Node in being direction, because in my mind, I was like, oh, yeah, it's like a North Star. So if you're new to astrology and you're learning about these things and you're like, oh, I want to know more about my North Node or my business's North Node, view it as your North Star in a way, that guiding light that's going to take you to this new height or the next direction.
Right.
And I also want to throw in on top of this that you mentioned that our businesses are here to help us grow. And I think I agree with that, but it's to grow outside of our perspective of success. And so when we look at starting your own business or doing your own thing, it isn't, can I make money or not? Right? It's, how can I measure my sense of success outside of resources, outside of material resources, and measure my sense of success from my sense of joy, my sense of freedom, my sense of flexibility. And yes, we live in a capitalistic society. Yes, we have to pay our rent and our mortgages and put food on the table.
Right.
But there's also, maybe it's the idealist in me, there's also this need to feel like the business is how allowing you to grow personally in a way where you're no longer trapped by capitalism or that greed or those resources.
So true. And I think growing up as poor as I did, that never was like a big thing for me. Like I know how to make things work with a very small budget. But we do have to, I mean, okay, I'm not going to get on my soapbox here about capitalism, but we do have to examine what are our priorities with growth in our business versus what are the priorities that society tries to pile upon us as what a business should be. Like if you're not earning multiple six figures with your business, why are you working so hard? Why don't you just go work for someone else? Well, for me, it's about the independence to take care of my health conditions and manage my health conditions.
For me, it's about the freedom to say, I really want to go away for a few days in the middle of the week. And I know that I can stack my clients on either end of that and they will be completely happy with it because they will still have their time with me. Some will be even happier that they're having a session on a weekend instead of during the week. And so it's about that, for me anyway, it's about having that freedom and not so much about money. I know that I probably could make money working for someone else. I just can't bring myself to do it. So I
I
definitely
feel the same way. I feel the
Yeah.
same way if it helps. Because I view time as the most precious resource.
It is, right? I just said this to someone yesterday. That's so true.
Mhm. I think money can come and go, and it always will. That is just
Mhm.
life. I don't care how much you try to save and hold on to it or you spend and you don't. It will always be in flux because it's also, in some ways, its valuation is outside of our control.
Right.
What isn't, though, is how we value time
Mhm.
and the importance that we place on time. Time is the only resource that we consistently lose. So I agree with you because the reason why I work for myself is because I value my time so much more
Yeah.
than I value the material resource.
Me too. And I think that there's nothing wrong with going into business and wanting it to be like a very financially lucrative thing for you. It's just about where does your joy in life come from? If you need super lavish vacations, if you need a gigantic house in a major metropolitan area, if you need, and also if you need a ton of money to donate into causes, more power to you. I love those people who love to earn tons of money. It's just, I have done the hustle and I can't do the hustle anymore. My body physically will not allow me to with all of my health stuff. And so I have learned how to value my time more than all of that.
Mm. And I think that that's probably one of the most beautiful things in this world, right? And you should feel proud of yourself for that because I don't think a lot of people have gotten there or are allowed to get there. Maybe
Are
is what I
allowed to
should
get
say.
there. Yes. I think a lot of that comes from near-death experiences also. Like, I think if you almost die multiple times, you're kind of like, well, yeah, time is my most finite resource. I have to really use it for what it's meant for me.
I mean, not to be tangential, but I agree with that so wholeheartedly. My life has been surrounded by death in so many ways. I mean, my father was murdered when I was little, and I was really faced with death so young.
Yeah.
And so my relationship with life, I feel like, is very different than people who may be similar to you, where you had near-death experiences. Maybe they have a different perspective or a different view. I always grew up with the mentality of live life to the fullest as much as you can, because there is, in this incarnation, right, there's a finite amount of time. Time is a resource. And so I think maybe that's why we value it so differently than, maybe just differently than how other people may who haven't had certain experiences.
Agreed. I love your tangents. It's always okay to get tangential. So tell us a little bit about this book that is upcoming because, before we even get to the book, let's talk about style. I don't have one really. And I really don't. I'm learning how to have one. Buying my house, my first house, has been a lesson in developing my own style and creating it. And right now I'm extremely into the 50s. So my dress for Pride this year. I'm sorry, what'd you say?
I said I can see it in your glasses.
Oh yeah. My dress for Pride this year was like this beautiful 50s style rainbow dress, tight on the top and a little waist and then poofy on the bottom. And so I'm starting to learn how to have style. It's never come super naturally to me, but I'm starting to also even notice it in other people. Like I have a crush right now and I love her style. It's so cute. So, let's start there. How did you develop your style and how is it related to astrology for you?
So my style's all over the place. And I love that about myself because I think style is so personal. And one of the things, so I talk about this in my book. My book which is about the intersection of fashion and astrology. I talk about how because style is so hyper personalized, it's like we should be able to change it up as much as possible or as much as we'd like. I mean, without going super deep into your chart, you have a lot of Cancer energy in your chart,
Yes.
right? And
Mostly
I tend
Cancer.
to notice, yeah, I tend to notice that Cancer energy is really interested or attracted to vintage or like historic style or like kind of modernizing historic style. So when you're like, oh, I'm interested in the 50s, I'm like, oh, of course you are, right?
Yeah.
Like, of course you love vintage. Um, or there's something about like looseness or coastal vibes or like integrating like oceanic vibes into your sense of style, which I can also look behind you and I'm like, oh, I can
Yes.
see like the blues and the
Yes.
blue in your glasses and the painting. So I think when you say you don't have a style, I want you to think about this differently because you do. Everyone has a style. And
Okay.
it's true. It's
Okay.
just that, is it on trend? Maybe not, but excuse my language, who gives a fuck? Right? Who cares? I don't care if it's on trend.
Yes. I don't
Um,
care.
Having worked in the fashion industry for a decade, one of the things I learned is that trends come and go, but your comfort level and how you embody your clothes is the most important thing. So one of the aims that I had in my book was more about self-confidence and self-worth. And yes, I give you styling tips and like maybe things that you might be interested in, but I was more interested in you wanting to feel more like yourself in everything that you wore. Even
Yeah.
if it wasn't what I predicted, quote unquote, was your style.
Mhm.
I want you to look at yourself and say, well, it's me. I'm
Yeah.
also queer, right? I
Yeah.
lived in the southeast of the United States, which we know can be very Bible Belt.
Yes.
Lived in North Carolina and Tennessee.
Oh, Anthony.
And I know it was pretty hard. And one of the things that, my identity was used as a weapon against me all the time. And that could have made me decide to want to blend in or to be like everyone else. But fashion provided me an opportunity to be creative,
Yeah.
to have self expression, to stand up for myself. Fashion is a cultural movement, it
Mhm.
is a revolution. It always has been. It is a form of artistic expression. And so when I chose to dress myself, I did it for me to affirm myself,
Good
not
for
affirm
you.
other people.
Yeah.
Well, and that's why I love fashion so much. And this is where astrology, because when we learn about our chart, it continues to affirm who we are,
Right.
right? Astrology is also revolutionary, right? It is also cutting edge, quote unquote. So when we bring these two things together and we dress a little bit more with intention, it is more about embodying your sense of self-worth than
Mhm.
anything else.
Yeah. I love that so much. I think that's really true too, because if you think about it, what could be more affirming to you than looking at where the stars were when you were born and seeing all of your different qualities in that
Mhm.
pattern? And as we pick out our clothes in the morning, we start to also affirm who we are with that outfit. I think
Mhm.
it's really hard to be a queer person in the world, just in general. I
Mhm.
happen to live in a very queer town. We have 29% queers, which I love. Yes, New Mexico is the best. But I also know that, God, I've been to the Southeast. Oh, I can't imagine how hard that was and what strength it took for you to dress in a way that was affirming of your own identity,
Mhm.
knowing that you might get beat up that day or certainly made fun of,
So yes, definitely faced with a lot of violence, but I can't let violence stop me from giving myself the compassion and love that I deserved. Right.
Right.
I will say I was very lucky. The household that I grew up in, very accepting for the most part.
Great.
It was just the external world. And so at least I had, in some ways, at least from my mother, I had, and my siblings, I had safety
Yeah.
to be who I am. Um, and so my Chiron, which for people who don't know, Chiron is an asteroid that is linked to the wounded healer. So
Mhm.
it's the wounds that we experience in this life, but also the greatest healing. My Chiron is in Leo.
Okay.
And Leo is definitely about like showing up, showing out, self-expression, being big,
Yeah.
being bold.
Yeah.
And I realized sort of that no matter how much I tried to hide, I was still sought and harm still found me.
Yeah.
So why would I hide? And maybe the Chiron and Leo thing was to face the wound personally
Mhm.
and not harm myself, but instead be more Leo, be more bold, be more expressive, be more exuberant. And of course, they moved away, clearly, right?
Thank
Because who
God.
wants to be there? I know. Who wants to be there? And I only developed more and more and more into my sense of personal style in the 12 years that I've been away from the Southeast
Yeah.
overall. And even when I go back and visit, because my mom built a house down there, and so I still have to go and subject myself to it, I don't dress conservatively or,
Mhm.
how people would quote unquote want me to dress because I don't owe it to them. I owe it to
No,
myself.
exactly. Oh,
Mhm.
that's such a freeing perspective. What else do you include in your book? Tell us some of the other things.
So, in the first section of the book, I think one of the most important parts about this is I actually link astrological transits to historical trends in fashion.
Oh, I love
Mhm.
that.
I think one of the most important parts in understanding how they're connected is seeing it on a larger mass scale first, because we
Okay.
have to understand how we are influenced by what's happening. So, if we think about, I did this whole thing on Pluto in particular and its relationship with leg shapes, like pant shapes.
Oh, cool.
Yes. And like how there are certain generations who are pushing certain styles of leg shapes and other ones that aren't. So, without getting into all of the details, Earth and water Plutos. So,
Mhm.
if your Pluto is an Earth or a water sign, you grew up with more narrow leg shapes. And so, as we trended with Earth and water Pluto transits, so like
Yeah.
where it was in the sky at the moment, narrower leg shapes were actually trending. A good example of this was from starting in 2008,
Mhm.
right? The skinny jean came on the scene.
Oh my God,
And
yes.
yes, and Pluto in Capricorn started in 2008.
Okay.
Well, we're coming towards the end of Pluto of Capricorn. We're in Pluto and Aquarius now. And with that has come the quote, death of the skinny jean, right? We've seen that. But it took that long. And the generation that was supporting that skinny jean, I guess, mania were
Mhm.
the Pluto and Scorpio generation
Okay.
because that was their style. Well, our Gen Z friends, our Pluto and Sag, have deemed that wide leg, looser fitting pants, flares, like that's more in style now. And, you know, they are now that we're in an air Pluto and they're fire Pluto, they're more compatible. So they're going to kind of push that trend forward. You are Pluto in Libra. So
Mhm.
you probably grew up with like low rise, more flare style jeans. Like I'm thinking about like early 2000s, late 90s.
Yes.
But that was when Pluto was in Sagittarius. So that style kind of comes back to your air Pluto, that fire Pluto. So there's this interesting relationship with leg shapes and Pluto that I discovered. And this makes sense because Pluto, among many things, rules mass investment and mass wealth. Typically in the fashion industry, one of the drivers in kind of mass production is pant legs,
Yeah.
right? Like
Yeah.
jeans, pants, like those are the things that like it's the foundation of an outfit, literally.
Right.
So that's something I noticed. Neptune tends to deal with like more haute couture, avant-garde, but also sort of allows us to envision maybe the more subtle, glamorous parts of fashion. So Pluto has been in, Neptune has been in Pisces. We've seen a lot of beading, a lot of fluid fabrics, right? A lot of gauziness. Neptune, is going to move into Aries. And so I anticipate there being a bit more of like military inspired
Okay.
or maybe something that feels a little bit more utilitarian or more minimal right? But maybe it's fiery. Like we have to think about Aries is very fiery, very cardinally.
Right.
Things will feel very innovative and cutting edge. So talked a little bit about that in the first part of my book, along with Jupiter's relationship with the color of the year. So Pantone every year picks a color of the year. And
Okay.
I went back, I think, as far as 2015. And
Okay.
every single year, it is aligned with the sign that Jupiter was in the moment.
Isn't
right?
it wild? This is like what I was saying, whether you believe, quote unquote, in astrology or not, it's happening.
Right.
Yeah.
So Jupiter was in Taurus when the 2024 color of the year was picked, and it was that peachy color, which is very rosy. Taurus is ruled by Venus, very connected to that color.
Okay.
2020, I'm just going to jump in for a few years. 2020 was Jupiter in Capricorn, and that color was true navy or classic blue, right?
Okay.
And Capricorn is very classic, very structured,
Yes.
right? I believe 2018 was Jupiter in Scorpio. That color was ultraviolet.
Okay.
And purple having that really strong connection, like the deep purple to Scorpio. So my first part of the book is all about the historical connections or the influences. And then the rest of the book is more about your personal chart. And it takes a look at every single placement and aspect in your chart to help bring you, I guess, a more holistic picture of yourself, including the nodes. I include that in there. Elemental just distribution. So are you more fire? Are you more water? We talk about your sun sign, your moon, your Venus, your Mercury, your Mars. I even provide visual samples or mood boards at the end of the book.
That's
That
exciting.
helps you sort of embody the energy or the style.
Okay.
Yes.
How do you feel about digging in with my chart a little bit on that?
Yeah, we totally can. Like I can already tell you, just kind of looking at your charts. Obviously, there's a lot of Cancer. I talked about the vintage energy, right? That kind of comes along with that. But, you know, it's interesting because you also have a lot of Virgo.
Yeah.
And I tend to notice Virgo energy really is interested in refinement or quality, or it's really caught up in the details. So one of the things they sort of talked about, like your moons in Virgo, with Virgo moons is how does the fabric feel? Because feeling is really important to Virgo moons.
It has to be cotton or I'm not doing it.
Well, so that's the thing. It's all about natural fibers.
Yeah.
Right. Is it utilitarian and or intricate in some way? So typically Virgo energy loves like that extra pleating, that quality piece, the embroidery, the way it sits on the shoulder, the little, the little bits. And it's because Virgo is so caught up in the details, right? That they care about the detail of the construction of the material or the piece of clothing. I tend to find people who have strong Virgo in their chart do really well with a capsule wardrobe. So like minimal pieces, not having too much. And this is because they get overwhelmed sometimes with too many options, but also it allows them to invest more in pieces that have quality that will last for a long time.
Right.
Versus super trendy pieces.
Yes, very true.
I can also say that you have Venus in Gemini. So there is some versatility there that has to be explored. And it's interesting because your moon and Venus square, so they kind of they create tension or at odds. So maybe what you feel comfortable in and what you're attracted to can also be at odds, right?
Yeah, that's true.
So there's this desire to have a lot of variety or to try all these different things or figure out what my style is or have multiple styles. Whereas your moon in Virgo is like, but I want refinement and minimalism. Right. So we're constantly fighting the two in your own chart. I mean, I would say my advice to you would be to have that capsule wardrobe, but maybe bring in 5 to 10 pieces every season that you can shift in and out, or, maybe every 6 weeks, so that way you keep something new and refreshed and interesting and not get like, oh, well, I've just worn this for the past. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But it also allows you to minimize the footprint that you also have, right?
Yeah.
In whether it's waste from clothing or, I don't know closet space you have. Maybe you don't have a lot of closet space. The other thing I will tell you is with your South Node in Pisces, shoes are very important.
Okay.
So the types of shoes you wear are going to have an impact, because I tend to notice when people have a lot of Pisces in their chart that they have feet problems, or
Yes.
they're
I've had 4 surgeries on my feet. 4.
so your shoes are going to be very, very important to
They
you.
are.
So in this case, you were going to pick comfort
Yeah.
over style. Although nowadays you don't have to choose the two, right? You can have both, especially like Birkenstocks are totally in. And
They are. I know.
So like that's a great shoe for people who have feet problems.
Mhm.
And there are things like they have inserts and stuff that you can wear. But like I would stay away from anything with a tall heel for you.
Oh, that's
Um,
impossible. Yes, I could never.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's not just because you have the Pisces South Node, but it's also because we have Mars and Gemini. We're moving a little too fast and we can be a bit accident prone at times. And then we have the 6th house ruled by Sagittarius, which tends to rule the hips and the legs. So when we wear things that are too tall, it actually can offset our hips too much and create some joint pain in our hips and legs.
So true. So, as a queer woman, we let other queer women know they can hit on us with our eyeglasses and our shoes. So I will always wear very lesbianotic shoes. And even before I came out, I wore very lesbianotic shoes because I have to. My feet just can't manage a high heel, even though I love them. I think they're so sexy. I can't wear them. So I have like 3 pairs of shoes. And when I find something that works, I buy multiple pairs so that when this pair wears out, I can have the next pair. Even if it's completely out of style, I don't care if I can walk in it. That's really all I care about.
That is so Virgo in a way where it's like, okay, like it's like a system, right? Virgos love a system. They're like, okay, this thing worked. So because it worked, I'm going to get it in every color.
Yes.
Or I'm going to buy it ahead of time to replace it, even though the other one isn't broken or gone or dead or whatever it is. Yeah. Everyone, I have a really good friend, her nodes are inverted from yours. She's a Virgo South node, and she does this too. So she will buy things that she just knows work. Because she's like, well, I don't want to ruin it. First of all,
Right,
perfectionism in
exactly.
Virgo. I don't want to ruin it. But just in case I do, I have the backup pair.
I have a backup. That is so, I mean, it's just makes sense. Why not?
It's true. That's so funny. Glasses, I think, are interesting. So when we think about the parts of a chart that rule the face, or, that sort of area of your chart, we're going to look at the first house. We're going to look at where Aries is as well. So your first house has Mercury and Jupiter, right? So I feel like glasses are the place that you would be bold. Do you ever wear like bold lip colors even at times, just as like something to stand out?
It's fun.
Yeah. Like your face is the place where you tend to maybe be a bit more like loud with your style. And that's because that Leo, you have a lot of Leo placements in that first house. And then glasses, I think, are great. Do you own any red frames? I feel like you should go for something red if you don't.
Really? So there's this pair of red polka dot ones that I've been eyeing and really, really wanting, but my whole face is red almost all the time. And I have to be honest, if I like meet someone that I'm attracted to, my whole face is red for the entire conversation. So I'm just like, I don't know, maybe red glasses are not great for me.
But maybe you'll find it empowering and as your power color.
Maybe. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Sweet. Why not explore?
Yeah.
I have a personal styling client who I really love. And in some of our conversations and helping her style herself over the past while, she's talked a lot about how she hasn't had autonomy over her wardrobe. But when I was walking her house and she was showing me things she loved, they were all bright pieces of red, right? She loved red. Yes, it was really interesting. She had an Aries rising, or she has an Aries rising. I shouldn't talk about her in the past tense. She has an Aries rising, so clearly red is like kind of her power color. Yeah. And she was showing me all these things, and I was like, well, let's build out part of your spring summer wardrobe around a color you love. Doesn't mean it's a color that's trending, right? but it's more about you and what you want. And so we did. And recently I went with her to pick out glasses, and she picked out sort of this, she was trying to figure out what glasses she wanted. And of course I was like, oh, try the red pair. She loved them. She ended up buying them, which is also kind of made me think of you, maybe a dark red. Maybe it doesn't have to be a bold, bright red. It can be a dark red, like a cranberry.
Okay.
Mhm.
All right. Good to know.
Mhm.
One other thing that I feel like I struggle with in terms of style and astrology is that pretty much everything that I own is blue and green. So it goes back to that thing we were saying about lots of Cancer in my chart, the ocean, everything is blue and green. Even my background is pretty much blue and green. Then I expanded into pink for a little while. I'm trying really hard to get out of those colors. Is that something either stylistically or astrologically that we should be concerned about?
So, it's interesting. I tend to find people with a lot of Cancer are creatures of comfort. So they're going to go for, what they know it works for them, is best for them, and they stick with it. So it's not just comfort in material, it's comfort in color. I would say branch out. Like, what's the problem with trying new things? You can always pick colors that work well. With blues and greens, maybe you need chocolate brown in your wardrobe, right? That way it's a little bit more earthy, a little bit more grounding. I also feel like if you feel like you're missing an element in your chart, so maybe you need more earth or maybe you need more air, pick colors that are representative of that energy. And that will help you feel a certain way. You know how like we have power colors I was just talking about, something that empowers you, right? Maybe that's your Mars placement. Well, then if you're looking at the elemental distribution, you're like, oh, I'm missing this element. I really need more earth, then add more earth tones. Or I need more fire, add more warm tones. For you, I feel like possibly, let's look at your distribution a little bit more closely. I mean, you're pretty evenly distributed. Earth is your most dominant, hence why you like green, right? Water being pretty high up there as well. There's your blue. I would say fire and air need a little bit more representation. So go for warm tones, maybe add in a metallic here and there for the air sign, or you can do maybe like lavenders, because lavender will tend to go well with green and blue, but is a bit more airy and light, right? Like you were going for pink maybe as a way of finding more fire or warmth in your wardrobe.
Yeah.
Right?
Probably.
I would even consider dark orange, and maybe not as like a shirt, but maybe as like an accent color.
Okay.
And one, blue and orange are complementary. They sit opposite the color wheel, so they work really well together. And two, it'll be like this nice pop. Like I think about, again, those Leo placements you have in your first house of identity and self, right?
Yeah.
It's okay to stand out a little. It's okay to have a pop of color. It's okay to be a bit more bold from time to time.
Okay. I love this book. I can't wait to read it. Thank you for thinking this way. I mean, this is the thing. In all the world, who on earth would ever think of this? Combining fashion? Just you. Fashion and astrology, only you have thought of this.
I'm sure there are other people in the world who have, but because I don't want to think I'm the only. There are billions
I'm so
of people
sorry.
in this.
I'm so sorry. Not you only, but you are the only one to think of this, to take the time to write a book, to take the time to find a publisher, which is no easy feat. We talked about this in our business reading. And I'm just so grateful that you're here in the world and with us today. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I really want people to feel so connected to things that feel intangible to them, because it's more real, more present than we think. So the essence behind AstroStyle is so that when you can move through and feel your chart, right? And see how it shows up for you physically or more tangibly in this world. So I appreciate that. I'm going to accept the compliment.
Yay. Bravo. So what would you like to share with us about how to find you?
Okay. So you can find me on Instagram at AP_astrology. I'm on Substack. The Substack is Musings in Transit. I am also on Patreon. Same thing. It's AP Astrology. My website is www.perrotta.co. That's Perrotta. And my book, AstroStyle, is already available for pre-order anywhere you can pre-order a book. So whether it's Barnes & Noble or Amazon or Bookshop or Books A Million, doesn't matter. You can pre-order a book. It is out in November. But I think that's it. I don't know where else you can find me. You can find me here on this podcast.
Thank you so much, Anthony. We'll include some links below for people, and I can't wait to read your book. Thank you again for being with us today.
Thank you for having me. It has been wonderful, and you are a marvel.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to these important conversations about cosmic leadership and the changing needs of our times. If you enjoyed this conversation, please rate and review this podcast on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also share it with a friend. Join our crew at Adelina East on Instagram or at Adelina East Healing on Facebook. With all the love from every dimension, Adelina.